Next, I'm introducing two people. Robert Noble, who has wears extraordinary two hats in his producing life. He's the Deputy Managing Director of Cameron Mackintosh Limited, so we can only imagine the extraordinary job that is. And he's also the Managing Director of Matthew Bourne's New Adventures, which is the amazing ballet dance company. And he does these two things unbelievably simultaneously, which I don't really understand how he does it. And through doing both of those has come up with lots of different models and ways of doing things, which he's going to talk about today. And asking him questions is Sean Egan, who's one of our industry's leading solicitors, lawyers, media advisors, really kind of nuts and bolts about different models, how they can work, what's possible and what's not possible. So, Sean.
Thank you very much indeed.
How long have we got? Because
we're running a bit late.
I know, but it's okay.
Okay. Right, so it's going to be, this is possibly a truncated version.
Yeah.
I'm doing the Parkinson. We've not got the same. And I've already warned Robert about not speaking too fast because there's an awful lot to get through. I mean, well, I think there are at least 4 different models that Adventures in Motion Pictures and New Adventures in Motion Pictures has been through over the time. So you get a whole sense as to the way in which this unique work has been presented without compromise on a large scale over a long period of time. I think that it's about the work, and that's the key. I mean, I'm here because I've had an involvement one way or another, I think, for at least 20 years. Which is a bit shocking in itself, but it's a delight. And there's certainly alchemy going on. It's an unlikely story. You take contemporary dance genre at the largest scale and you look to fund it and find ways of making it happen to as many people as possible. And in many ways, I think that's the challenge, and that's why you've had to be nimble over a long period of time and find different ways of doing it. Now, I hope there'll be a little bit of time at the end to look to the future rather than just the past, because I think that's just as exciting and interesting in terms of yet another model coming down the line, if I can put it that way. So, I mean, Robert, perhaps if you could outline the various transformations over the period, and we see how we go on from there.
Okay, great, thanks, Sean. Well, it has been sort of an amazing journey, and I think the reason I really wanted to come and talk today was because I think New Adventures or Adventures in Motion Pictures before it, there were no other models, I think, in the arts world that work like this, and particularly absolutely sort of extraordinary that it happens in the dance world, which certainly, dare I say it, probably 20 years ago was incredibly conservative in the way that dance kind of worked. Indeed, I did once go to a meeting with, in fact, I'll even mention her name because I'm not very fond of her, called Hilary Carty. Make sure you don't meet her in the street. And she said that, luckily no longer really involved, I think. But she actually said to me about 20 years ago, when I went to see her about public subsidy money, she simply said, almost said to me, over my dead body will we fund Matthew Bourne in an appropriate way. We don't have the money, we simply fund in particular dance companies, large dance companies, and really not much else. Almost kind of go away, and I promise you that's a pretty verbatim. I'm dressing it up a bit, but not wholly. So. Basically, and it was interesting what Nick Starr said, because I do think the most successful thing about sort of commercial theatre and subsidised theatre is kind of really making sure you're looking after the artistic product and the vision of perhaps a particular person within your organisation. And obviously, from my point of view, that's Matthew Bourne, who's done an absolutely sort of extraordinary job in terms of his vision. But basically the company 20 years ago started as literally a back of a van, small scale theatre company going around the country, taking these sets out of the van, going to small scale theatres. And Then there was a little bit of development. The shows went to the Royal Court, I think. There were a few seasons there. And slowly and steadily, a little bit of support from the Arts Council, it was starting to build, but still very, very small. And then a small group of people came together to the Arts Council to sort of help fund Matthew Bourne's all-male, not the all-male, but what is commonly called the all-male Swan Lake in 1995. And that production was supported by the touring department of the Arts Council with the support of a certain number of venues. There was also a little bit of private money into it that was raised as well, and that production opened at Sadler's Wells and then became a sort of international phenomenon. That proved that, and I was kind of involved in the company, but not really at that time. That did cause some problems, because what happened was there was kind of real explosion of success, and the production went to the West End, again with commercial investors involved, and then went to Broadway, and obviously still runs. But at that time, the company really had to make a choice. There'd been that difficult meeting, well, it wasn't actually with me, but there'd been difficult meetings again with the Arts Council, because at that time, the Arts Council funding streams were not really enabling a company, particularly in dance, to develop in this way. It's very different from theatre, where you've seen there's much more movement, I think, or used to be a lot more movement of production companies or artists being allowed or able to sort of slowly move up, upscale, or just develop in a different kind of way. Dance was much more straightened. So the company at that time then really had to go into the commercial route, which was hard, I would say. I mean, the production values didn't deteriorate. Matthew produced Cinderella in the West End, or the company did, again with commercial investors, then did Carman at the Old Vic, on very much a commercial West End model. And also within that was developed something called a shareholders scheme, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend as a scheme, which basically was, again, I didn't raise it, I hasten to add, but it was but literally because it was so difficult, this kind of pains of growing up, if you like. The shareholder scheme is basically a scheme where people put in money. So they actually advertised through the newspapers. People put in units of sort of £500, and amazingly raised well over £1 million. But and basically then those investors had association with a whole brand of different shows. But what they had was a guaranteed income that came out of those particular shows on the weekly running costs. Sounds initially like maybe rather a good idea. But of course what happened was that with dance being very expensive in any event, these kind of large shows that suddenly being created, which is what Matthew wanted to do. He wasn't being pushed by the management to do it. That's what he wanted to do. It started to fracture, basically, because you couldn't keep that economic model going. It actually was proving that although Matthew was very popular and there was a large audience, in terms of investment and then having shareholders' obligations on top, meant that actually the whole thing actually did, probably people don't really know this, but did sort of implode. And I came into the company in the next stage of the company, when really New Adventure, it was actually Adventures in Motion Pictures then. Matthew moved from his previous business partner, and we started afresh, and then had to negotiate arrangements with shareholders and so forth, which I'm glad to be very happy and in terms of going forward. So we then had to create another model. How did it work? Because what we were seeing was that the commercial sector was kind of saying to us, in terms of commercial money as well, Matthew's a great artist, these are great shows, but to be frank, they don't really make any money. So why are we going to put any money in unless we're doing it purely on a philanthropic basis? And we still had some problems with ACE, who, at that stage, their funding structures were not able to give the kind of money that was required to either help the weekly running costs just a little bit, or to help the capitalisation. So then that changed, because luckily over the last sort of 10 years, we've then worked with a really good kind of ecology. First of all, with the Arts Council, with changes in the way that funding streams have worked. First of all, through grants to the arts, and then through the Strategic Touring Fund, in getting appropriate monies now for these kind of large-scale productions that we do. So, we're getting about 750.
And that's with the innovation is now having a charity.
Well, not yet. That comes a bit later. So this is purely through the production companies. So we have separate production. We have our key company, New Adventures Limited, and then we have our own production companies below that actually map the productions. So we were getting support from the Arts Council, support from private investors, and also, very importantly, support from the regional venues, who very much understand the kind of slight fragility still of this ecology. A lot of people think Bourne and New Adventures is making masses of money. It's not necessarily making masses of money. It's still a tight ecology. And so we also, I have to say, get very good arrangements, theatre deals with venues because of the success of the production, but I think also because they buy into the kind of product. So the way that it works, I think it's quite interesting, because I don't think many people work like this, and particularly in dance, and it may be useful, certainly for you who work on the middle scale and small scale, it may just be a model that's completely inappropriate because of the margins of how you work. But let's say capitalisation is, £1 million, and I raise £500,000 from commercial investors, and I get £500,000 from grants to the arts. The deal that I do with the Arts Council is basically, I say that, what we say to the investors is basically they recoup their money based on £500,000. Because basically what I say to the investors is, let's say at Sadler's Wells, where we do an 8 or 10 week season of, say, Sleeping Beauty, you'll recoup your £500,000 if we play to 75% financial capacity in Sadler's Wells over an 8 week season. And obviously, we do touring as well, but obviously touring, again, the margins are very tight, so there's not huge amounts of surplus there. So for the investors, what the Arts Council are doing is unlocking money, if you like. We're not contaminating, this is very important, not contaminating the subsidy with commercial investors. What that subsidy is doing is allowing us to be able to go to those commercial investors and get money for them at it's something that will give them not a huge return, but a reasonable return, and will make them feel that it is worth them getting involved. Arts Council then say, okay, we can do that. As I say, it's £1 million, 500 from ACE, then you raise the 500, recoup at £500,000. But then when we get into a profits, we then pay profits in terms of profit share based on the £1 million. So that basically means that there's money that we then are holding as a company that relates to the Arts Council share that they've put in, if there is any surplus. Of course, I'm not saying all the time we make surpluses. And of course, then there is money also that goes through to to the commercial investors. And then we go to ACE at the end of that kind of project, and hopefully there's some money made. And then there is a bit of horse trading with them in terms of how we use that money for the future. So it's a bit like Nick, he's in a, or like all of you may be in a more, organisation, Bricks and Mortars and so forth, but rather like Nick saying certain monies from Warhorse or whatever is going back into the organisation to support other work. Arts Council may say to us, well, if you've made, if our share of the money has made £200,000, we will want you to use that money in certain ways, reinvestment in new work, research and development, and that kind of thing.
So we have very much a model which is commercial investment for commercial reasons, in other words, on the basis of a reasonable return, as opposed to social finance where it was maybe accepting a probable loss And that's the only way you can get the money in for those sorts of shows with this model at the moment.
Yeah, with that particular model. So what we're doing is because obviously we could say to the Arts Council we'd like £1 million. The Arts Council obviously funding us for very particular things that we do. So from the Arts Council point of view it works because they're not having to put quite as much money in as they would wish to do so. And for the commercial investors, they're still getting some, they have got the opportunity of return, but again, it's carefully managed so that what we're not doing is making that return so ridiculously large that there could be any, any reason for, that it's, that the balance isn't quite right.
But it seems to me it's that balance that is the crucial question at the moment, which is the extent to which you've got public money is supporting work and enabling it to happen, but without being seen to deliver a benefit to private investors. And that is a really crucial balance. And it's only over time can you work that through as to where the numbers lie. I mean,
yeah, that's absolutely right. And that therefore has enabled us to then create, because obviously we are not purely a part subsidised, part commercial, as I say, company. We do other things and other young people and so forth works that may well not be involved in relation to kind of commercial, what is seen as commercial. I see a small sort of popular arts market is, if you like, what we are, but being able to pull together the two strands of commerciality and subsidy, I would say probably largely because we've had to. There's been no choice for New Adventures than to go down this route, and we've had to be very nimble as we've seen different people come and go in the Arts Council, different individuals, different policy, of how we've kind of made that those shifts work. And as I say, sometimes in very difficult periods, like having to go, there's no other way but to go into the commercial market, which caused great pressures. And then I think now a much better model, a model at the moment that works, rather well for us. For the future, we're looking, I don't know whether we will get NPO funding because we've never had it, but we are, like a lot of other people, in the NPO round. But what we are then looking to do, which again is able to be a different model to the model again I've just talked about, is that we would create, because we do a lot of young people and engagement work anyway, we are asking the Arts Council to fund our charitable arm, so to be which is called Reborn, and it's basically Reborn, for instance, is producing Lord of the Flies around the country at the moment for very specific reasons, again because of young people and active engagement. So what would happen is that the money, if we get it, I have no idea obviously whether we will get it or not, our model then will change again. The money will go into the charity from the Arts Council, and any production that has nothing to do with commercial, which has no commercial money whatsoever involved in it, that Arts Council money will remain in that charity with Board of Trustees and so forth. However, if we end up doing other commercial, part subsidised projects, then that money will move back into the production companies, and obviously there will have to be full transparency between the charity and those production companies in the use of that public money, and we will use it in that way. And what I'm rather hoping is, certainly with the tax credit news coming through, which we still of course don't have all the information yet, but what I understand is it may well be that we all, even subsidised or commercial companies that kind of manage that situation, may have to be creating other kind of subsidiary companies around our base companies to be able to simply administer that problem. It may well be that we, as a company, and I don't know, may be more attractive to the Arts Council in the NPO portfolio. Now, in the past, there's always been a great concern, again, because we have private investment, commercial producers, not commercial producers, more private investors coming in and kind of, and there's been some nervousness in terms of the actual guidelines or rules within the NPO system in the past. So if we don't get the money, we will just go back to our original kind of format. But I just thought a lot of people don't really know I mean, even the major dance companies don't even know how we're actually funded, which is a bit bizarre to me, but there are not many of them here. But I think it is quite an interesting. It's quite an interesting model that maybe is of interest in terms of the way that you look at your particular organisations, either on the middle or on the small scale, because I know there are quite a lot of you from those kind of organisations.
Let's stop it there. And I think to have the time for a few questions, if I can, because I know we're running over. Any questions? Yes.
Can I ask why you wouldn't treat ACE as an investor? Why wouldn't you put them on the same playing field as your commercial investors and offer them a return?
Well, they do get a return. They are. What I'm saying is that it's like a sort of trigger mechanism, as I say. So still, I say the money is still being recouped. If you've got that £1 million capitalisation, ACE still are getting, if they put $500,000 into the show, they are still getting a return absolutely similar to the investors. The only scenario is that it's not returned to them per se. They are simply saying to me, okay, this is what you've earned, this is what we think you should do with it. I mean, there's a lot of, I know lots of conversations that often go around about, if there has been subsidised money, placed into a production that then has a long commercial life, should there be more of a, should there be more of a kind of income stream that goes back to ACE? I think there are problems in relation to that because of the way that ACE is funded or government. I'm not an absolute expert on that. But no, they are treated exactly the same. It's only that what happens, as I say, with the investors is they get their money back, only back. They're not going to keep making more money, they're just getting their money back. Earlier, if you like, to make sure that mechanism, to make sure that actually...
I think there are also two reasons, in that if you offered ACE the same terms as the investors, then you wouldn't be able to bring the investors in because they would have lesser terms, they wouldn't actually be able to recoup. And also I suspect there are legal reasons why ACE would have some difficulty as well. Any others? Yes.
So for your investors, what's your capital of giving them money back? Do you have capital, or what's their return rate if they hit profit after they recoup it?
There's no cap rate, so most of them, again, dependent on how much they put in, most of them are on standard 60-40 terms. So 60% of the surplus going to them, 40% again going back to the company. Sometimes if people, which is fairly normal, if putting in large tranches, may well want more and a higher percentage, and that's absolutely fine. It depends on the show really. Edward Scissorhands returned, I think, recouped and made 10% return over a two-year period. Some of the shows have done considerably better than that, but also what I would say is some of the shows as well don't need Arts Council money anymore. So for instance, part of our model as well is, like Swan Lake is done commercially now. It is because it is so successful. That's still great for ACE, they don't have to put any money into it, but it's part of the portfolio of the company. Some of the other shows need that little bit of nurturing, like Edward Scissorhands, for instance, a bigger show, maybe not quite such a popular title. It's a great show, but just needs, every time it's performed, needs just that little bit of money to kind of, to make sure that it's not too difficult for Fiddle or Norwich and Peter Wilson and other venues, around the country to take it. So that's why we have to keep that sort of fragile ecology going between those those three partners.
Okay, one more. Now, then I know Peter's chomping at the bit too.
One more. Sorry,
yes.
One more.
How receptive were the Arts Council in accepting this model when you started? Was it a battle?
It was, to begin with, it was quite a battle, I think, again, because, Grants for the Arts certainly didn't originally have the sort of size of grants, I think, originally. I remember with Edward Scissorhands really having a battle hard. I don't think there was quite a cap in those days, but you know, it used to be sort of 150, 200, you had to be very special to get something through. So it's to be fair, I mean, I think Moira, who runs Arts Council, thank you. So Moira Sinclair said to me once, we're like an oil tanker, but we're getting there slowly with this. We're getting there, and it took. And to be fair to the Arts Council, actually, I mean, I have to say they've been incredibly supportive, actually, about, certainly in the last 10, 15 years, as we've kind of created this model. And I think they're interested and excited about this model. I mean, we were asked, it's quite amusing, we were asked to actually talk about it a little bit more to some of the, larger dance companies like Birmingham Royal Ballet and English National Ballet about, how some of these systems work and, compared to their very different kind of ways of working. So I have to be fair, but as always with these things, because no one had ever done this. I can't tell you how conservative dance used to be. We really were frowned on. This was the theatre world. Could never believe moving from theatre or indeed working for Cameron, but I worked for other subsidised theatre companies prior to that. I couldn't believe how different the two art forms were, and I pray and hope that the theatre and the dance art forms, should be working much more together, and dare I say it, I think dance should be working much more like the theatre art forms work. It's absolutely, I think that's happening actually, and there's more enlightened, dare I say, arts officers, dance officers as well in the Arts Council. Hilary Carty is long gone.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Really